For 35 years, she was known only by a first name and a borrowed label, the Becca Jane Doe. That's what investigators in Albuquerque, New Mexico, eventually called the young woman found deceased in a motel room in June of 1991. They found her body hanging from a shower head by a suitcase strap, her identity a complete mystery. She had no identification of any kind, but what she did have would spark the interest of both the authorities, and much later, the internet as a whole. She had a photo booth picture showing her alive beside an unidentified man, $500 in cash, a digital scale with a stranger's name on it, and a suitcase full of clothing. For over 3 decades, those items were the sum total of what anyone knew about her. Then, on March 5th, 2026, what would have been her 53rd birthday, the Albuquerque Police Department announced that the Becca Jane Doe had a real name. She was Becca Malakut, born in Tacoma, Washington, in 1973, and she was 18 years old when she died. This is the story of how her name was lost and how, after more than 3 decades, it was finally found. But now that Becca has her name back, there's still more questions than answers in her case. On the evening of June 3, 1991, a man named Eduardo Collin walked into the Super 8 Motel at 2500 University Boulevard Northeast in Albuquerque and rented room 233. He paid in cash, registered for 2 guests, and listed legitimate personal information on the registration slip with one exception, a false license plate number. Collin was described as a local car mechanic. He was expected to check out by 11 the following morning, but he didn't. By June 5th, motel staff realized no one had vacated the room, and a security guard was sent to investigate. The door was deadbolted from the inside, and the windows were locked. The guard used a screwdriver to force his way in. The room didn't look alarming at first. Alcohol bottles sat on the table alongside a purse, a pocketbook, a suitcase, and a photograph. But when the guard stepped into the bathroom, he found a young woman with curly strawberry blonde hair hanging from the metal shower head. She'd been dead for approximately 2 days, her body already decomposing in the dry Albuquerque heat. The air conditioning in the room hadn't been turned on, which accelerated the process significantly. The medical examiner ruled that she had done it herself while under the influence of heroin. Minor abrasions on her face and leg had already begun healing before she passed, suggesting that these weren't related to any sort of recent attack. The room showed no signs of a struggle, no blood, and no disruption to suggest anything other than a solitary act. Investigators cataloged the scene carefully. The woman stood about 5'7" and weighed roughly 140 pounds. She had hazel or gray eyes and wore a multicolored tie-dye tank top from a brand called Trends, white denim Guess jeans with zippers near the ankles, and a wide metal bracelet. Her belongings included a dark blue suede purse, a gray woven pocketbook, the $500 in cash, and a digital scale bearing the handwritten name George Martinez. The now famous photograph appeared to have been taken in a mall photo booth. It showed the woman making a face at the camera beside a young Hispanic man who offered a slight smile. Motel staff identified the man as Eduardo Collin, the person who'd rented the room. But when police finally located Collin's family several years later, they learned he'd already died of natural causes, or perhaps an overdose. But then things got even more unusual. His relatives confirmed the handwriting on the registration slip was his, but stated that the man in the photograph wasn't Eduardo. Unfortunately, they had no idea who the woman was either, or whether Eduardo had any meaningful connection to these 2 individuals. The motel clerk had only seen Collin briefly at check-in and couldn't recall with certainty whether a woman had been with him, making the earlier identification unreliable. The name George Martinez on the digital scale unsurprisingly led absolutely nowhere. It's an extraordinarily common name in New Mexico, and the scale was the type commonly used for weighing substances. There was no evidence linking any particular person by that name to the case. Some theorized the name might have been a street alias scrawled on the scale by a dealer, while others believed it had nothing to do with Becca's death at all. Compounding the mystery, by the time a new detective was eventually assigned to the case, much of the original physical evidence had been destroyed. The detective believed the case could have been solved far earlier if those materials had survived. Instead, the woman remained nameless. At least 16 missing women were ruled out as potential matches over the years, and the case went cold. The case sat dormant for decades but never entirely disappeared from public consciousness, largely due to the haunting circumstances in the photograph. Amateur true crime buffs kept the story circulating, debating whether the death was truly self-inflicted or not, and speculating about who this woman might have been. These intrepid investigators would end up filing extensive records requests for the case. Podcasts and YouTube videos flourished discussing her case, and if you're a longtime viewer, you may remember that I covered this case back in the hazy days of 2024. This sustained public attention may well have played a role in what happened next, though clearly I can't say that for certain without confirmation from detectives. In March of 2021, investigators announced a significant break. The man in the photograph had been identified and had come forward anonymously. He told police the woman's first name was likely Becca or Rebecca, and that she was possibly from the Reseda or Sylmar areas of Los Angeles County, California. He said she'd flown to Albuquerque from Los Angeles or Burbank shortly before her death. The nameless Jane Doe suddenly had a first name and a probable city of origin. Investigators began referring to her publicly as Becca Doe in official communications and appeals for information. But a first name and rough geography weren't enough to make an identification, and he was generally unsure of details about her. The genetic angle would ultimately solve Becca's case, an angle that got off to a rocky start in the second decade of the investigation. In 2009, the New Mexico Office of the Medical Investigator had submitted a genetic sample to the CADIS system, but no matches were found. The system relies on a limited number of genetic markers, and without a family member already in the database, there's no chance of a hit. The comparison unfortunately couldn't bridge the gap between this anonymous young woman and anyone who might have been looking for her. What changed everything was investigative genetic genealogy, a relatively new forensic discipline. Unlike CODIS, this approach uses whole genome sequencing to compare DNA against publicly available genealogy databases. It's a far more powerful tool, capable of identifying distant relatives and building family trees that narrow down a subject's identity. It's also extremely expensive, which is precisely why many smaller law enforcement agencies have been unable to pursue it on their own. In December of 2025, an investigator contacted the Investigative Genetic Genealogy Center at Ramapo College of New Jersey. Founded in late 2022, the center was the first of its kind in the nation, offering pro bono casework, research, and hands-on education in the discipline. It had already resolved numerous cold cases across the country, identifying individuals whose remains had gone unnamed for years or even decades. Critically, Ramapo performed the work entirely free of charge, removing the financial barrier that had stalled many agencies. But of course, being a free service and there being tens of thousands of Doe cases in America, the demand is exceptional. But Becca's case had become so widely known and talked about that her case was able to be fast-tracked. While genetic genealogy used to take years of painstaking manual research, modern technology has now changed the game, and the results came remarkably fast. By January of 2026, the investigation had produced leads pointing to a half-brother and, indirectly, a stepfather living in California. The feds worked alongside Albuquerque police to locate the stepfather in Ventura, California. He confirmed he'd had a stepdaughter and that the last time he'd seen her was in 1991, when she left the Los Angeles area. A sergeant from the Ventura Police Department then located the half-brother, who agreed to provide a genetic sample. The comparison confirmed with 100% confidence that the mystery woman was his long-lost half-sister. On March 5th, 2026, the Albuquerque Police Department announced that Becca Doe was Becca Malakoot. Her family, after 35 years of silence, finally had an answer. With identification came context, though less than one might hope, and it turned out that Becca was living in Los Angeles at the time of her death. She'd been dating a man there, and they'd taken that photo booth picture together. Although they broke up, they stayed friends. The man's brother-in-law, Eduardo Collin, developed feelings for Becca, a situation that could lead to some bitterness, potentially. However, that doesn't seem to have been the case here, given what allegedly happened next. With her ex-boyfriend's knowledge, she made plans to fly to Albuquerque to meet Eduardo. Her ex dropped her off at Los Angeles International Airport. This fills in key structural gaps, since we now know Eduardo Collin wasn't a random stranger. The man in the photograph was her ex-boyfriend, the same person who came forward in 2021 with the anonymous tip that ultimately cracked the case open. The photo was a keepsake from their relationship, carried across state lines and placed on a motel room table, perhaps the last thing she looked at before she died. But vast stretches of her life remain unknown. It doesn't appear she was ever reported missing, which is staggering for an 18-year-old. Unconfirmed accounts suggest she may have aged out of the foster care system, which could explain why no family came looking for her. If true, it paints a devastating picture of a young woman moving through the world without anyone positioned to notice when she vanished. Becca Malakoot's identification answers the fundamental question of who she was, but it opens a cascade of others. Eduardo Collin remains an enigma. He rented the room, listed a false plate number, and vanished. He never checked out and never came forward. Some have speculated he may not have known Becca died. In 1991, without the internet or widespread media coverage, it's plausible he simply left and never learned what happened afterward. Others point to the false license plate as evidence he wanted to avoid being traced. The locked room has generally been taken as strong physical evidence that Becca was alone when she died, but the circumstantial questions linger nonetheless. The official ruling remains that she did it herself, and the available physical evidence does support it. Personally, I think this is likely the end of the line on Becca's case, and we are unlikely to ever know much more. Based on the strong evidence to indicate she was alone when she perished, I don't believe there was any foul play here. If the foster home story is true, Becca's case is yet another case, all too common, of someone who just slipped through the cracks in the transition to adulthood. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a quick reminder to check out the Patreon, or the YouTube membership if you want to contribute to my channel directly. Also, no video would be complete without me telling you to like and subscribe, so don't forget to do that if you haven't done so already. On the morning of December 20th, 2009, paramedics rushed to a mansion on Rising Glen Road in the Hollywood Hills. Inside the bathroom, 32-year-old actress Brittany Murphy lay unconscious. Her mother Sharon and husband Simon Monjack had found her collapsed and called 911. Firefighters attempted to revive her on the way to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but it was too late. The woman who'd charmed audiences in King of the Hill, Clueless, and 8 Mile was gone, and the circumstances surrounding her death would only grow stranger with time. A Los Angeles coroner initially told the Associated Press that Murphy's death appeared natural, but that assessment barely scratched the surface. When the updated coroner's report arrived on February 4th, 2010, the official cause of death was listed as community-acquired pneumonia. Secondary factors included iron deficiency anemia and multiple drug intoxication, the latter despite no illegal substances found in her system. The drugs present were all prescription or over-the-counter medications, including elevated levels of hydrocodone, acetaminophen, and chlorpheniramine. Due to the combination of medications in her weakened state, Murphy's death was classified as an accident. In the weeks before she died, Murphy had been battling a staph infection that hit her hard. She'd developed severe laryngitis and was experiencing her second period in a single month, worsening her anemia. For roughly 6 weeks, she'd tried to push through the illness without seeing a physician, a fact that will become very suspicious given the context I'm about to discuss. She finally called to schedule a doctor's appointment on a Friday, setting it for the following Monday, but she didn't survive the weekend. The question that haunts this case isn't just how she died, but why nobody in her household got her to a hospital sooner. The circumstances of Brittany Murphy's death are completely baffling without a full understanding of the situation she found herself in at the time of her passing. Enter Simon Monjack. Monjack was a British screenwriter and director whose credits were thin and whose reputation, once examined, was devastating. Born in 1970 in Hillingdon, England, Monjack had a troubled history that predated his arrival in Hollywood by years. He'd been evicted from multiple homes, had outstanding warrants in Virginia for alleged credit card fraud, and was successfully sued by a bank for nearly $500,000. In February 2007, he was arrested and jailed for 9 days over an expired visa. He'd told people he was a billionaire, that he'd dated Madonna and Elle Macpherson, that he owned Ferraris. He claimed that he possessed the largest private collection of Vermeer paintings in the world. There was just a little wee problem with Simon's debonair billionaire persona. None of it was true. Before meeting Murphy, Monjack had been engaged to a woman named Elizabeth Ragsdale. He'd proposed with a Tiffany's ring just 2 weeks after they met and told her he was dying of spinal cancer, claiming he needed experimental treatments derived from shark cartilage. There's something so disturbingly poetic about him choosing a shark as the animal he would allegedly be receiving this treatment from. Much like the common shark, if the allegations are true, Monjack sensed weakness and struck upon it with ruthless efficiency. When Ragsdale became pregnant, Monjack abandoned her, leaving her absolutely devastated. She later contacted his mother about the situation, expecting to perhaps find out that Simon had passed, and discovered the entire cancer story was fabricated to manipulate her. Years afterward, when Ragsdale saw a magazine photo of Monjack alongside Murphy, she said her first reaction wasn't jealousy, it was pity for Murphy. She tried to write a warning letter but never sent it, fearing it would seem like a ploy by a bitter ex-lover. While she may have been bitter about her time with Monjack, if her treatment was anything like what happened with Murphy, that was quite honestly the only rational response to her interaction with him. Murphy and Monjack met in 2006 and married in a private ceremony in April 2007. The relationship moved fast, and the changes in Murphy's life were immediate. According to multiple friends and colleagues who later spoke in documentaries, Monjack systematically isolated Murphy from everyone around her. He convinced her to fire her agents, managers, lawyers, and accountants, claiming that they were all scheming against her in some way. He became her sole representative in all professional matters, even serving as her makeup artist on some final projects. Her phone numbers were changed, and friends who tried to reach her were told they had to go through Monjack. Actress Lisa Riefel, a close friend, later described it as though Murphy had simply disappeared. Actress Kathy Najimy recalled that everyone in Murphy's circle was frightened and bewildered by the situation. Celebrity trainer Harley Pasternak, best known for his Kanye interactions, tried to contact Murphy's team about a role and was told Monjack had taken over every function. There was no way to reach her directly, and she was completely isolated from everyone she knew, while being under his complete control. Under Monjack's management, Murphy's career deteriorated sharply. She went from starring in major studio films to working in low-budget indie productions. In November 2009, the couple traveled to Puerto Rico for a film called The Caller, but Monjack allegedly showed up on set intoxicated and caused disruptions. Murphy was let go on the first day after she refused to dissociate herself from what everyone assumed was simply an oafish husband disturbing the set. She'd also been dropped from Happy Feet 2, a major studio film that she was planning on lending her voice acting abilities to. The woman who'd once been one of Hollywood's most in-demand young talents was struggling to find work, and the man controlling her professional life appeared to be the reason. Monjack also took control of Murphy's finances. It's been estimated that he spent approximately $3 million of her money over the course of their 3-year marriage. Meanwhile, Murphy was the sole breadwinner, supporting not only her husband, but also her mother, Sharon, who suffered from neuropathy after battling breast cancer. The household on Rising Glen Road had become a pressure cooker. Murphy was sick, overworked, probably broke, and cut off from the support systems that might have saved her life. She was caring for everyone around her while nobody, it seemed, was caring for her. If Murphy's death raised eyebrows, what happened next sent conspiracy theories into overdrive. On May 23, 2010, just 5 months after his wife's passing, Simon Monjack was found dead in the same Hollywood Hills mansion. Sharon Murphy discovered him unconscious in the master bedroom around 9:20 p.m. and called 911. Paramedics arrived but couldn't revive him, and he was pronounced dead at 9:45 p.m. at the age of 40. The coroner's report on Monjack's death was eerily familiar. His cause of death was listed as acute pneumonia and severe anemia, nearly identical to Murphy's case. Unlike Murphy, the medications in Monjack's system were at therapeutic levels and were not considered a contributing factor. The fact that two people living in the same house had died months apart from what appeared to be the same ailment was deeply unsettling to the public and to investigators. The Los Angeles County Department of Public Health investigated whether toxic mold in the home might have contributed. This fatal mold story took over news headlines at the time, but the coroner stated there were no indicators that it played any role. In January 2012, Murphy's estranged father, Angelo Bertolotti, filed a petition in the Superior Court of California. He requested that the coroner's office release hair samples from his daughter for independent testing. The initial suit was dismissed after Bertolotti failed to appear at 2 hearings, but he eventually obtained samples of Murphy's hair, blood, and tissue. He sent them to a private laboratory called the Carlson Company in Colorado, which reported finding elevated concentrations of 10 heavy metals in Murphy's system. These included antimony and barium, a substance commonly associated with rat poison, suggesting something much more sinister had happened. Bertolotti went public in November 2013, claiming the results were proof his daughter had been deliberately poisoned. The poisoning theory made national headlines, but it didn't hold up under expert scrutiny from forensic scientists. Toxicologist Bruce Goldberger, who served as president of the American Board of Forensic Toxicology, reviewed the lab report and raised serious objections. He noted that Murphy lacked a telltale sign of heavy metal poisoning at the time of death, specifically the distinctive horizontal lines across the fingernails. Without that marker, he concluded, it was unlikely heavy metals contributed to her death. Another toxicologist pointed out that hair dye alone could account for heavy metals in a hair sample. Murphy had, in fact, prepared a will. In it, she left her entire estate to her mother and included a pointed statement declaring that she'd intentionally excluded her husband. It appears that she had significant insight into Monjack's nefarious nature, but ultimately, for whatever reason, she didn't leave him. From the evidence, I believe she may have been scared to leave him, worried about what consequences she would face if she fled. By the time the spell was broken, and she evidently saw Monjack for what he really was, he had already fully isolated her from the entire world. She may have been slowly making moves so that she could extricate herself from the situation safely when she unfortunately passed away. Ultimately, it's not precisely clear to me what caused Brittany Murphy's death, and the answers don't appear to be satisfactory at all. The official record says Brittany Murphy died of pneumonia, anemia, and prescription drug intoxication. That said, this seems like a situation where she needed to be rushed to hospital urgently, and if she had been, it seems like she might have survived. That makes me question if perhaps Simon Monjack didn't want her going to the hospital, for fear that she would use it as a way to escape the prison he had built for her. Of course, that's speculation on my part, and I can't say with any certainty that there's any veracity to the allegation. Interestingly, Monjack's ex-fiancée, Elizabeth Ragsdale, may have offered the most incisive assessment of the entire tragedy. She stated her belief that even if Monjack didn't directly cause Murphy's death, but for his influence, she would almost certainly be alive. And it's hard to disagree with this assessment since the entire trajectory of her life went off the rails the moment she met this individual. There's a reason cats have always made certain people feel uneasy, and even us cat lovers have to admit they're very peculiar creatures. They watch you from dark corners with unblinking eyes, moving silently to reposition themselves outside your line of sight. They disappear for days without explanation, yet they don't seem to have been roughing it at all, suggesting that they may have another home. A giant dog, Clifford, is one of the most beloved characters in our culture because a giant dog maximizes canine qualities. With cats, we have a name for the big ones: tiger, lion, panther, puma, creatures that we'd rather observe in a zoo than run into in the wild. Some people even claim that they seem to know things they shouldn't, a fact which can either be good or bad, depending on your relationship with the feline in question. In Japan, this unease didn't just linger as superstition. It crystallized into one of the most terrifying and enduring creatures in the entire yokai tradition, the Nekomata. This creature is an infamous fork-tailed cat demon that could raise the dead, speak human language, and destroy lives with nothing more than spite and sorcery. The Nekomata is a cultural artifact that reveals how the Japanese relationship with cats evolved over centuries, from reverence to dread and back again. Understanding the Nekomata means understanding the paper-thin boundary between a beloved pet curled on your lap and a monster waiting to consume your soul. The earliest references to the Nekomata appear in the Kamakura period, around the 13th century. The poet Fujiwara no Teika mentioned the creature in his diary, the Megatsuki, noting an incident involving one of these creatures. A Nekomata from the remote mountains of Nara had attacked and eaten several people in a single night. This wasn't a household cat completely gone wrong, as the later myths would suggest, but something different. At this stage, the Nekomata was essentially a mountain predator, more akin to a monstrous wildcat than a supernatural being. Scholars have suggested that these early accounts may have been inspired by encounters with actual large cats or other predators in the forested regions of Japan. The Kokon Chomonju, a 13th century collection of anecdotes, also references the creature as a large and fearsome mountain-dwelling animal capable of devouring humans. However, despite this, it was clearly a beast that lived in the wild, not a domestic cat gone wrong. The transformation of the Nekomata from a wilderness creature into something far more intimate happened gradually, likely between the 14th and 17th centuries. As cats became more common as household animals in Japan, the mythology surrounding the creature shifted dramatically. People began to believe that any ordinary cat, if it lived long enough, could transform into a Nekomata. The telltale sign was the tail. Once a cat's tail split into two forks, as was the style at the time and in the region, its transformation was complete. This belief carried enormous consequences. It meant that the creature sleeping at the foot of your bed could one day become a demon. Cats that grew too old were viewed with deep suspicion. Some owners reportedly abandoned elderly cats or deliberately cut their tails short to prevent the split from ever occurring. The eventual rise of the Japanese bobtail breed may owe their prevalence in part to centuries of this superstitious tail docking practice. When a domestic cat transformed into a Nekomata, its powers became formidable. It could walk upright on its hind legs, mimic human speech, and manipulate fire by waving its burning tail. Most disturbingly, it could reanimate corpses, dancing them like puppets or directing them to accost its foes. The Edo period artist Toriyama Sekien depicted the Nekomata in his famous illustrated yokai encyclopedia, the Gazu Hyaki Yagyo, showing a bipedal cat surrounded by ghostly flames. His illustrations cemented the creature's image in the popular imagination and greatly popularized the genuine belief in the creature. In fact, the association of the Nekomata with otherworldly fire marks one of the favorite supposed activities of this creature. They like to return to the home of their former owners and burn it down, while playing melancholic tunes on a cat-skinned shamisen and lamenting how things could have been if they were better people. What made the Nekomata so psychologically potent wasn't just its supernatural abilities, it was the betrayal. Here was an animal you'd fed, sheltered, and trusted, and it had been quietly accumulating power the entire time. The Nekomata was presenting itself to you as a friendly domestic creature that could handle your mice problems. But all the while it was noting all your daily habits, ready for the day when it could strike you down and make your corpse dance for its amusement. The Nekomata represented a deep anxiety about domesticity itself, the idea that familiarity breeds not just contempt, but genuine danger. The Nekomata heavily intersected with beliefs about the vengeful dead, and many sources believed that if you treated a cat well enough, there was no risk of it transforming. In many Edo period stories, the cat became a vehicle for the grudges of deceased owners, particularly women who'd been wronged. These women confided everything they were going through in the only creature that would listen, their loyal cat. In one common story archetype, the mistreated woman would pull the curtains on herself, but not before giving the cat instructions to become a Nekomata and seek revenge. The woman's ghost, acting in concert with the cat demon, would then seek to haunt her husband's household and torment his new family. The Nekomata hasn't disappeared from Japanese culture, though genuine belief in cats becoming demons is now presumably non-existent. It persists across manga, anime, video games, and contemporary literature, though often in significantly softened or reimagined forms. Yet the real legacy of the Nekomata may be simpler than any pop culture cameo. It's there every time someone looks at a cat and wonders what it's really thinking. Looking at a cat's eyes is much different than looking into the eyes of a dog. Cats maintain an aura of mystery, even to their so-called owners, in a way dogs never do. The Japanese understood something that cat owners everywhere sense instinctively: These animals are never entirely ours. They tolerate us. They observe us. And if the old stories are to be believed, they're keeping score. And if the ledger doesn't add up in your favor, your trusted cat might grow an extra tail and burn your house down.